The PlayStation 5 has undoubtedly marked its position as a groundbreaking gaming console since its highly anticipating launch back in 2020. But now it finds itself transitioning into a more mature phase of its life cycle, so says Sony. Much like its predecessors in the peak of their respective generations, the PS5 boasts remarkable power and capabilities, prompting speculation among gamers about the duration of this particular life cycle. While traditional consoles typically experience a decline in their later years, the talk amongst the gaming community suggests that the PS5 has yet to reach peak performance. Despite being 4 years old, the PS5 does continue to impress with its performance and versatility. Gamers have noticed that the console isn't being pushed to its technical limits, indicating that there's still plenty of untapped potential waiting to be explored with the PS5. Sony recently acknowledged that the PS5's sales performance fell short of its initial expectations, attributing this to weaker holiday sales and a lack of major franchise releases. This acknowledgement, coupled with the hints from senior executives about the console entering its later stages, has sparked curiosity among enthusiasts. However, Sony's history of robust support for older consoles does provide reassurance to gamers. The PS5's compatibility with PS4 games does ensure continued enjoyment, and that leaves room for speculation about potential future features and updates that could further extend its lifespan. In light of these developments, prospective PS5 buyers are faced with a decision. Despite the console possibly nearing the latter part of its life cycle, its arguably exceptional capabilities and the likelihood of continued support make it a worthwhile investment. Gamers who may not immediately transition to a hypothetical PS6 upon its release could still find ample value in experiencing the PS5. It's my assumption that hardcore gamers, at least most of them, know that a generation can last up to 10 years or more before support for those systems start to drop off. Not one of us can pretend that there aren't people still out here playing on the PS4 Pro and even the Nintendo Switch. When it comes to PlayStations specifically, in fact, the first 3 generations lasted 6 years each. The PS4 stuck around for about 7 years and is still going. That particular pattern would dictate that the PS5 should last about the same length of time. But it would seem that we're getting ahead of ourselves. For you see, back in July of 2020, the summer before the PS5 was even released, an even shorter than normal life cycle for a gaming console were already being talked about. And even by Sony's own suppliers. And it's important to note that this is July of 2020, 4 months before the system was even released. The PS5 wasn't even on shelves yet. And I think we need to clarify a thing or two, because I think everybody is running away with this idea of PS5 being at the quote-unquote end of its life cycle. While I do not think that they'll cease support for the console, while I do not think that developers won't make games for the console, I do think that Sony really means that they won't produce as many consoles. They won't manufacture as many for sale after a certain amount of time. It just so happens that we are entering that time, and what that looks like for Sony is not so many PS5s being manufactured as there were in, let's say, this past year. Because as we all know, they couldn't make enough consoles in the beginning of its life either. But let's keep our heads together about this quote, folks, because here's an important thing to note. The PS5 in just about 4 years has sold over 50 million units. Another important thing to note is that the PS5 is capable of making great games. Developers still have untapped potential, as I mentioned before, to get into making more great games. The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered is a great example of what this system can do, and it still, we know this, hasn't reached peak potential. Outside of a bunch of remakes and remasters, one could argue that we haven't seen the PS5 reach its potential yet because the library is just so lackluster. It's not that the PS5 doesn't make great titles, it's just that there aren't enough to see it. We have a long way to go with the PS5. We can calm down. And now you can check out the last minute and a half of Holdout, which is the one encounter I hate the most on No Return. Check it out, and if you want to be so kind, this channel is pretty much brand new, so any engagement would help me out. Like the video, maybe share it, subscribe if you think you want to see more of this, and I'll talk to y'all in the next one.